5.5 or more on the Richter scale. In an average year, there are 3 or 4 great quakes.
You people have no idea what it's like. It was just horrific. And the skirting boards and the floor where they met were just doing this. They were clapping and they were actually eating up rugs.
The whole sky was just sort of dripping blood. It was so red.
So we think we should keep looking.
And nobody heard me.
Then there was a terrific thrust.
He came out onto the footpath and this thing just landed on top of him, and that was the finish of it.
All the kids were screaming, coming towards you. And I got into the second classroom when the big one hit us.
And then it suddenly hit that my daughter, my grandmother was after my daughter here at home, what had happened at home, what had happened elsewhere. And I saw them and just burst into tears.
There was no words that could describe what you'd just been through.
In New Zealand, the city of Wellington sits perched on one of the world's spectacular harbours. On a fine day, it is a place of almost magical beauty. This capital city is the nerve centre of a nation, but it also sits astride one of the most earthquake-prone areas on the globe. In many ways, it's already aware of its unending danger. But is Wellington, its engineering, its political and civil system, and most importantly, its people, really ready? Stretched right around the entire Pacific is a ring of fire. It's a geologically active region of erupting volcanoes, geysers, fault lines, and above all, earthquakes. At the base of the ring lies New Zealand, with Wellington in the middle, between North and South Islands. Here, the South Island is simultaneously being crushed and sliding past itself, pushed and pulled by the most gigantic forces in all of nature. On the opposite side of the Ring of Fire lie Los Angeles and San Francisco. Every now and then, one of these cities lurches towards Alaska, as occurred in October 1989. Behind this activity lies the San Andreas Fault. Here, the Pacific Plate grinds past the North American Plate. This sliding past zone is similar to New Zealand's South Island. But this volcano in New Zealand's North Island is evidence of an entirely different mechanism: subduction. In this instance, subduction refers to the diving under of one tectonic plate beneath another. This same subduction threatens huge population centers. Tokyo is also subject to violent earthquakes, where land is alternately rising, falling, buckling, a sort of giant trampoline of destruction. For all of this, Wellington's major fault lines make a good case study, because these fault lines are affected by both the South Island's sliding past zone and the North Island's diving under zone. It also means Wellington is strikingly vulnerable. Wellington is endangered in the same way as both Los Angeles and Tokyo, and is thus a true cauldron in which to study typical Ring of Fire earthquakes. Cutting in from Cook Strait to the south, the Wellington Fault is prominent and dangerous, with some of the largest and fastest movements in the world. Some parts reveal steep hills thrust up from beneath, while others hold striking resemblance to the San Andreas fault plain near Los Angeles, reflecting a confused distortion of forces torturing this region. The reason for Wellington's striking vulnerability can be found between the islands, deep in Cook Strait. Research has revealed a surprising fact. It upsets a long-held view that Wellington's major fault lines continue from one side of the strait to the other. A device which shoots sound waves to the seafloor was trailed behind a ship. Returning sonar bleeps were then recorded on a printout, allowing faults beneath the sea to be mapped.
We managed to trace the fault lines from the North Island and South Island, and they certainly extended to Cook Strait. But in the middle, they don't join up. In fact, the fault lines are cut, and this cut appears to be along the line of a rather large submarine canyon.
Computer animation of data gathered clearly shows this canyon slicing a deep trough between the two islands. This canyon has been deepened by scouring action of strong tidal currents. But why is this whole area slumped and sucked down, as if by a primal subterranean force?
Well, we strongly suspect, because the cut follows this break in the fault lines, that the cut is itself a fault.
Fault lines, once thought continuous, are now known to be cut and twisted, bisected along the line of the underwater canyon. But if this cut is in fact a fault, why is it at a completely different angle? All around Wellington, on headlands overlooking Cook Strait, scientists have placed earthquake-sensing devices. These instruments each day detect 4 or 5 small earthquakes deep down, where the Pacific plate pushes beneath the overlying Australian plate. This information is then radioed back to the Seismological Observatory in Wellington to be analysed. It's this research that answers the question as to what caused the deep cut in Cook Strait at such a strange angle.
We've discovered that the subducting Pacific plate, instead of being a simple structure, is broken in the Cook Strait region.
Diving under movement begins to dramatically change to sliding past movement at this break in the Pacific plate. It also holds an ominous danger for Wellington above, as it can trap an earthquake like an echo in a closed room.
If there's a big earthquake to the north of Wellington on one of the strike-slip faults, it probably will not propagate south across Cook Strait, but come to an abrupt halt.
Well, what you're talking about last night's one, it certainly gave me the heebie-jeebies.
Thought it was the washing machine spinning. I was actually in the toilet when it happened. And I was really scared. I thought, my God, I'm going to die in the toilet.
It hit the house at such a force that it actually threw you off balance. You couldn't stand up. So I headed for a doorway. I held onto the doorway, and that started giving way.
Buildings were rocking and swaying, and the ground was terribly unstable. People were about and crawling on their hands and knees up the street.
Research has revealed yet another sobering fact, 20 kilometers below Wellington, in the middle of the subducting escalator.
The overlying Australian plate is in under compression, and this implies that the interface between the two plates is locked together. They're pushing together, giving us the compression.
How long do you think they may have been locked for?
Probably on the order of 70 or 80 years, something like that.
What will happen when they unlock?
Well, they unlock in a big earthquake.
When a scientist talks of a big earthquake, he means big. 7.5 on the Richter scale or larger. In fact, a great quake. The last time Wellington experienced such a quake was in 1855. It stands as New Zealand's largest so far. Fortunately, the town then was small. It was just getting started. But new thrust-up shorelines left no doubt of the quake's tremendous power. It was this quake that lifted a sea-swept bridle path, allowing easy conversion into a multi-laned highway. Some settlers planned to dig a canal for shipping along this swampy street, but the quake turned it all into dry land. Now there's a soccer and cricket stadium, and the nearest ships are a mile away. Parts of today's international airport also rose. This area was once covered by sea, and through here, ancient Maori once paddled canoes to and from the harbour beyond. These earthquake upliftings were nothing new, as for thousands of years, convulsions had pushed up a succession of new reefs, beaches and hills. 1855 Great Quake even passed into Hollywood folklore, reenacted here in the 1947 movie Green Dolphin Street. While this film was largely dismissed by locals as over-dramatized, it does in fact give a remarkably accurate idea of what a great quake will do. While the ground may not open up everywhere, incessant tremors, pieces of mud, and even a wall of water sweeping in from the sea are all dangers a great quake could bring. Working out when such a great quake is likely to strike is now of prime importance to cities everywhere. In 1964, to the north, on the Ring of Fire, a great quake of 8.4 on the Richter scale struck the city of Anchorage, Alaska. Even though very few people live in these remote parts, 115 people died. The quake's impact was spectacular, with streets breaking like glass and shops slumping into giant holes. Such quakes aren't uncommon in Alaska. In the last 200 years, there have been over 1,000 strong earthquakes. 14 of these were considered catastrophic. This 1964 quake wasn't expected, but a few years later, another great quake close by was. Research showed that very large quakes occurred in geographical gaps between previous ones, so that by 1971, scientists were giving warning of a number of such gaps. A year later, a great quake actually occurred within a gap. Such long-term warning from decades to centuries is certainly of use to Alaska. But what about elsewhere? New Zealand also has a scattered pattern of large earthquakes up and down the country. But here, plates interact on a smaller scale, and it's more complicated than in Alaska. So clear identity of gaps isn't possible. What has been worked out is that somewhere in New Zealand, a magnitude 7 or greater quake will occur on average every 10 years. It's been over 10 years now since the last such quake.
Exciting. I like them. Everything starts shaking and it's all on, basically.
Well, I'm leaving the country.
It'd be like a bunch of lemmings running around trying to save each other.
And if the end's near, you know, say a little Hail Mary.
They actually remind me of apples on a tree. There was about 13 classrooms, 13 teachers, 13 groups of children. And then I came and I sat on the field to rock the children, like so they wouldn't feel further shakes coming, although some were too big and they'd all start screaming, I want my mum. Some were hysterical, some of the little ones were quite, and that frightened the other ones. Some had gone into instant shock and were asleep on the teacher's laps. I'd say each teacher probably had 2-3 kids asleep.
In October 1989, a magnitude 7.1 earthquake hammered San Francisco. Here, the Oakland freeway collapsed, trapping and killing many. An upper deck span of the San Francisco Bay Bridge also fell, culminating in massive traffic disruption. And in the Marina district, 3-story buildings concertinaed into one. Long-term warning of such quakes is useful for engineers who need to know how strong to design buildings. But medium-term warnings are needed too. Such warnings of years to decades would help galvanize public action. In New Zealand, scientists are conducting research that one day may lead to medium-term warnings.
Where do you think the S would be, in here, or there was an earthquake in 1977, January 1977, just off Cape Campbell in Marlborough, magnitude about 6. When we were studying the small earthquakes that had occurred in that area prior to the Cape Campbell earthquake, we found that there was a time of about 8 years when the B value was around about 2, which is extremely high. No one ever finds a value of about 2, but it was. And then it returned to normal for about a year prior to the earthquakes occurring.
The so-called B value compares the large number of very small quakes with those a bit bigger. It's normally about 1. From 1970 to 1975, a high B value of 1.5 rising to 2 migrated about Cook Strait, as if the earth beneath was being twisted and turned by some deep underworld convulsion. All went quiet for a year, and then a magnitude 6 earthquake centered off Cape Campbell rattled Wellington.
So we have to say, well, maybe it's not a coincidence. Maybe the earthquake is related to this effect in the background earthquake activity.
The Richter scale is logarithmic, and at magnitude 6, the Cape Campbell quake was in fact very small, 180 times less powerful than the smallest great quake.
It wasn't a very large earthquake, but this particular lift, because it was fairly low down in the building, actually started slamming back and forth, and it did everything. It shook, it rattled, it didn't roll, thank God, but it did all these other things. The cables were making strange sort of twanging noises, and as the lift continued to rise, from the bottom of it came the sort of rumble of the earthquake.
Yep, we found you.
Scientists are now developing ways to give short-term warning of a great quake. That is, anything from a matter of days to a few months.
Okay, we have a return signal, and we'll start a measurement on frequency 1.
Every few years, movements along major faults are measured. At present, Wellington's hills are being squashed together as if locked in a vice, compressing a few millimeters a year. A rapid change in this rate of movement may indicate an impending great quake. If so, other telltale signs will be closely monitored. An increase in quake activity may be felt. A sudden rise in radon gas levels in deep mines may indicate rock breaking under strain. And then there are last-minute signs, sudden changes in water levels in wells, and reports of strange animal behavior. For instance, rats escaping from holes and behaving as if drunk. Following some major success in short-term warning already achieved in China, it's possible to look toward the day when TV quake forecast will be as normal as the day's weather.
Good evening. The forecast for the next 2 years is as follows. Risk remains high, with a 30% chance of a major quake occurring in the East Cape. Risk has also risen to a high level in North Westland. And 2 new centres of risk have appeared. An area of lower risk has developed about Foveaux Strait, and another area of moderate risk has developed about Wellington. The outlook for Wellington is that risk will increase to a high level.
Since filming this forecast, scientists have announced the risk of a great quake along a Wellington fault to be in fact exactly the same as this simulation, from moderate to high. And when added to the risk of the plates beneath Wellington suddenly coming unstuck, the danger is even greater. If there's ever a time for a city to get ready, it's now. New Zealand's last great quake struck Napier on a hot summer's day in 1931. It was the day that schools returned from their summer vacation. 256 people died, crushed beneath tons of debris and incinerated by raging fires, leaving only clues like the tops of handbags to identify ashes. As New Zealand's first great modern quake, it marked a turning point. First, it showed a clear need for a prepared civil defense. Here, fortunately, a warship was in port and its sailors took control. And secondly, this quake exposed completely inadequate building practice.
It was just a collapsed mass of masonry and wires and steel.
The whole front on the seaside had fallen out. You could see into the rooms. And there was a lady who was one of the maids, because the maids were calling out, who was trapped. And the building started to crack up and the top floors began to cave in and she went down with it. And they were screaming, she's gone.
He was killed when a wall fell on him. It was only a wall that had been put up about 12 months or so beforehand, but it was very obvious to our knowledge these days that there was no reinforcing in the wall at all.
The Napier quake wasn't the first to teach New Zealanders a lesson the hard way. In 1855, Wellington had already learnt about death trap buildings. In the 1840s, English settlers arrived in Wellington Harbour. With them came a tradition that important buildings must be built in stone. One citizen proclaimed brick as a sure defence against earthquakes, and so he built a new brick hotel, the showpiece of the town. Tragically, when the great quake struck, the hotel was shaken apart and the proud owner killed. This lesson didn't go unnoticed, and most townsfolk rebuilt in wood. Building in wood continued for decades, with even large government office blocks being built of wood. This building is the largest wooden construction in the Southern Hemisphere. But the designers still took pains to ensure at least it looked like stone. Today, this tradition of wood continues in one important area. New Zealand homes are considered the safest in the world, still built from wood, or at least wood-framed. But old ways die hard, and the desire for brick has returned. In 1971, north of Los Angeles at San Fernando, a moderate-sized quake struck. 59 died. Here, another disturbing trend in modern home design became clear. Many homes were built with large underneath garages for 2 cars and poorly connected because of a split-level design. It was found these homes simply collapsed into their garages. In New Zealand, there's a lot of similar design and similar danger. One report estimates up to a quarter of New Zealand homes could be severely damaged by this and other design faults. And then there are the commercial buildings.
What are my chances of surviving? Very little, I have to say, yes.
Yeah, it could be very dangerous, but if you can find a safe enough place, it should be all right.
Pretty bad.
I wouldn't give myself a chance, really, eh?
The disaster of Napier 31 led to a major change in commercial building techniques. The first earthquake building code was published in 1935. Since then, codes have significantly improved. New Zealand's earthquake building codes now stand among the most stringent in the world. today, earthquake engineering is following a new road. In the 70s, New Zealand scientists, looking for ways to isolate buildings from quakes, tried some amazing ideas. One was a device that looks like a car shock absorber. Another involved a steel plate that would bend from side to side in an earthquake. One was a tubular arrangement, while yet another involved sitting a building on top of a large lead and rubber sandwich. Once the ideas were perfected, they searched for buildings in which to try them out. The Clayton building is a government building almost on top of the Wellington fault, an ideal test bed. In its basement, between the ground and the building, dozens of lead rubber bearings were sited, each one supporting a 100-ton load.
The rubber bearing supplies a horizontal restoring force. It's a spring. It brings the building back to its original position. And the lead plug down the middle does two things. First of all, it absorbs the energy of motion of the building during the earthquake. And the other thing it does, which is quite important, is it locks the building in place so that when a gust of wind comes along, the building doesn't oscillate back and forth. The lead rubber bearing is used where the foundations are very firm, so you have bedrock.
And then there's the lead extrusion damper, the one that works like a car shock absorber. This demonstration shows how it works. When pushed, it absorbs the earthquake's energy by squeezing lead through a narrow neck. The energy is turned into heat, as this water test shows.
Well, in the case of soft foundations, for example, we've got reclaimed land, like in the case of the police building, what you'd do is you'd drill some deep holes down to the bedrock, put down a flexible pile, and then build your building on top and use lead extrusion dampers to absorb the energy of motion of the building during the earthquake.
Here, the two black tubes represent the dampers. How well this method works can be clearly seen when two models are compared without a ground reference. The first building of fitted lead extrusion dampers is the new Wellington Police Headquarters. These dampers, working in conjunction with deep flexible piles, mean that a building needn't be so strong, allowing a significant 5% saving in building cost. Such innovative building isolation techniques now lead the world. While engineers prepare buildings, others rehearse Wellington's disaster response.
In 117, it appears to have hit something in the tunnel. I'll be out the vehicle for 5 steamboats.
113, not being anything from going into the tunnel, please.
When the big one hits, the first called will be emergency rescuers. They're professionals trained for anything: fire, chemicals, maimed and dismembered people, collapsed and twisted buildings. Even so, with a great quake comes frightening problems. How prepared is civil defence?
I think it's good, and I think it's increasing well, and our contacts with other overseas nations show that really we've got a system we can be proud of.
Crucial to this system is the training of non-professional disaster managers.
We do studies, and we do training weekends, and we run a training school, but by far the best thing we do have exercises.
Exercises are designed to test controllers' flexibility.
So we have a crowd control problem and a catering problem.
They must think the unthinkable.
What about CD police?
Roger, reference number.
And they must expect the unexpected.
One of the problems that I faced was that there was a lady who had a broken hip, and she was in a tent at the college. And I was concerned that she was going to go into shock. I needed to get her medical attention urgently, and I was unable to do it. Doctors that I could call upon. I couldn't find a doctor. The ambulances, the ones that were available, were committed. But at that time, a deer recovery helicopter was circling the college. So I turned my blue lights on the police car and got my flashlight out and just kept flashing at him. And I think probably more a curiosity than anything else, he landed.
It's impossible to anticipate everything a great quake will do. If it happens at night, with people at home, casualties will be mercifully light. But if it hits during a busy day, the toll could be horrendous. 3,000 dead and 24,000 injured, according to one report.
The problem will be, if the disaster is in a working day, is to get them home. And we'll be talking about at least 85,000 people to get out of Wellington. And that'll be the problem.
The truth is, nobody knows what will happen.
Well, we'll see who we've got. We'll send them in first.
Yeah. It's clear, if scientists' worst fears come true, rescuers will simply be swamped, unable to cope.
If you could priority that, we have a double accident. Now, I need a chopper urgently. Can you get any? We should have had some just about airborne by the time this disaster happened.
Civil defence and emergency services in this city face an uncertain future, not knowing what to expect, except that one day, all hell will break loose. When the great quake strikes, there'll be many surprises. To the east of the Ring of Fire in 1985, an 8.1 quake struck off the Mexican coast. 400 kilometers away in Mexico City, its impact was horrifying. Here, thousands were killed by hundreds of buildings simply collapsing. And yet, curiously, some similar buildings close by remained intact.
During the night of June 24th, a severe earthquake shook the southern half of the North Island. After a night spent sleepless while the earth shook, buildings fell, chimneys cracked and toppled, Masterton saw streets littered with debris.
In 1942, during the Second World War, a series of moderate quakes struck the New Zealand town of Masterton. 80 kilometers away in Wellington, the quakes were felt as a number of sharp jolts. Here, 20,000 chimneys were twisted or brought to the ground. Compared with Mexico City, these quakes were light, and so was the damage. But in one area, near the harbour, again an unusual pattern emerged, where damage was way above average. Later it was found that the worst damage occurred along a wide strip of land on top of highly porous sediments, where once there were beaches and a seashore. This link between building damage and soil type alerted scientists to an unusual danger. In Wellington, it spawned a special study of soft soils, but it was Mexico City that really confirmed scientists' worst fears.
The large distant earthquake sent out waves that resonated with the soil in Mexico City, and the buildings also resonated with the soil, so we got a double amplifying effect. So that buildings that weren't on soft soil and buildings that weren't the right height had nothing at all happen to them. But the 200 buildings that were on that particular depth of soil and were in the particular height range just got clobbered.
Resonance requires three things. A building must be on deep soft soil, the earthquake must originate some distance away, and the building needs to be just the right height. It will then destroy itself, in the same way as marching soldiers can bring down a bridge.
The Wellington area is a really interesting one because there are a lot of little gullies and each one acts as a system on its own with its own characteristics. But we do know that there are soft soils there and they're the depths of soil that are likely to be bad news for buildings probably over 3 stories, and probably under 6 stories would be my guess. Lots of cities are built in places where rivers come down into harbours, and the rivers deposit layers of these soft soils. Tokyo is one, San Francisco is one.
Following the last ice age, a warming climate caused sea levels to rise. This warming happened all around the world. When things cooled, the sea fell again, leaving deep, soft soils on which to build. If these soils resonate in a quake, they can increase stress or load on some buildings 10 to 20 times.
Now, in New Zealand, we add 20% to the loadings, sometimes because of soft soil. Regard that as enough in the case of a Mexico City sort of situation.
The movement of the walls came in and out like that, and you could see daylight, and then you couldn't see daylight, and you thought, oh, hell, is this really happening to me?
But that's how it looked, as though the school had just disappeared, just evaporated in dust and rubble.
I would envisage that large marble slabs would come down, your sheet glass would smash and come into the streets. I'd imagine they'd all collapse. It would be devastation.
There's yet another danger facing buildings on soft soils. Following a major quake in Niigata, Japan in 1964, to people's amazement, many buildings fell over. On a balcony 3 floors up, a woman was pegging washing. Incredibly, she hung on and rode the building to the ground, then simply walked away.
Liquefaction is when the sands in particular below the water table turn into a liquid under shaking, literally. And that means that structures which are designed as buildings are suddenly being asked to perform as boats. And they do what a badly designed boat would do, tip over.
When soils liquefy, water and mud bubble to the surface. It happened in Wellington in 1855 and 1942. Today, the city's main fire station exits onto soft soils. And this main ambulance station sits directly on top of some of the deepest soft soils. These vehicles may not even get a chance to leave their stations on the day when all hell breaks loose. As in Mexico City, when the great quake strikes Wellington, it'll be complete chaos. For the first 72 hours, it's everyone for themselves. Hundreds of old concrete and brick buildings pose a major threat, even if upgraded, as local bylaws require them to be only 1/4 the strength of new buildings. While modern buildings may stand, they're far from safe. Glass and objects will crash into streets or tumble about offices, creating chaos high and low.
Well, I was sat at my computer in the office, and it all started to shake. And quite violently, everything moved forward and back and forward and back, big crashes, bangs, everything everywhere.
And at some stage in that, I just thought we were going to die. I didn't think we'd get out of the office where we were.
And the door was banging and swinging, and you thought, oh no, this is going to cut my fingers off.
There was this amazing noise, like a pew, and the microwave just picks up in the air and just crash to the ground. You think, oh my God, what am I in? The fridge and the freezer start walking out towards you, like there's somebody inside the fridge freezer, like that coming out.
And then I just looked down at my feet, and there was about 4 water in the pool, and I couldn't see where it was. That must have been up in the air.
And then it was over, and everybody just walked out. A lot of the kids actually ran, people were crying.
And when the sledgehammer stops battering, the problems only begin. Wellington has reticulated gas, narrow streets, and strong winds. Other cities have found these to be a deadly combination. In 1906, a firestorm swept through San Francisco on the heels of its great quake. It burned for 3 horror-filled days, burning out 5 square miles of city center. But following Tokyo's 1923 quake, hundreds of small house fires spread and mingled, eventually joining to envelop the city in a single roaring blaze. In all, 140,000 people died. Even if spared the terror of fire, Wellington's emergency will continue for years. First, the city will be strangled. With hills collapsed and highways blocked, help from inside is all but impossible, and relief from outside may take months. The only access may be by sea. Wellington's been warned before. In 1968, a short distance away, a moderate-sized quake shook the rugged Inangahua Mountains. Here, whole hillsides swept into gullies, removing all trace of roads. Nearby, 40 years before, the Great Quake of '29 had a similar effect. Few were killed in this wilderness, but here again, transport was brought to its knees. While Wellington rebuilds and roads, its infrastructure will die. People will wait impatiently for trains that never arrive. Months will pass, and a refugee economy will emerge. Small businesses will fail through lack of custom, as living off relief becomes the accepted norm. Thousands of kilometers of pipes will need replacing, frustration will mount, years will pass, while people still wait for sewers and water to be reconnected. Head office businesses will be particularly hard hit, for they depend on sensitive computers and uninterrupted power supply. Staff will soon face dismissal, and senior managers will move to areas away from the disaster. And soon, government will follow. Facsimile machines and telephones can be used without having to think about earthquakes.
I don't really think much about earthquakes at all.
They don't really worry me at the moment.
They don't really faze me. I'm not used to them.
If you're lucky, I suppose.
There's not much you can do about it.
We've never experienced it, that's the thing.
The trouble is with disasters that you can never program people to think about it.
We didn't believe what was happening, and then it goes through your mind what you should be doing, and you didn't do it. You sat there and froze.
I think you can never train people to do it. You can take some steps, but you can never train them what to do at that time. It'll just happen.
When the Great Quake has struck, it'll be too late. Yet, governments have faced impending disasters before. During the 40s, with the threat of economic chaos following war, large funds were set aside to rebuild bombed-out cities. As the war wound down, the New Zealand Parliament created an Earthquake Damage Commission. This fund, then and now, stands unique, there being none like it anywhere else. But still, it'll never rebuild a city after a great quake. Wellington needs $15 billion. Today, governments like New Zealand's have urgent need to anticipate the full economic and social impact of a great quake. During World War II, many governments went onto war footings to battle invading armies. Great quakes are expected in many ring-of-fire cities. There's now urgent need for these cities to also take war footings. Just as Europe prepared in 1939 when they faced the black storm clouds of war, so too today, people in earthquake zones everywhere need to be ready and waiting for the big one.
Next on One, it's time for Loverboy to meet the parents. But what on earth will they have in common in May to December? It's New Zealand's One for the best of British comedy.